Hi everyone, I am Dr. Catherine Kelly. I want to talk to you a little bit about grief today. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about human grief, but I'm really going to emphasize the difference between karmic grief and human grief. Now, I have had my fair share of grief in my life. Most of my aunts and uncles had passed by the time I was 20. Three of my grandparents had died before I was 20. My father died when I was 21. My remaining grandfather passed about 2 years later. I've had friends killed in car accidents. I've had several friends die of cancer. I obviously have several clients who have passed away, neighbors. I mean, it's just one of those things where, again, I just know what grief is. I know how I do grief, and that is one of the things I want to emphasize is as people heal through grief, you don't know how you're going to go through it until you experience the first or second or third time that you've lost someone. And it's one of those things where you get better about it over time. But one of the things I tell people about human grief, at least, is that basically, I don't think we ever stop grieving. We just learn to do it better. Like we learn how to cope, we learn how to adjust to the fact that that person or that animal or that situation has really gone its way. It's no longer here. But I want to really emphasize the difference between human grief and karmic grief. Now, anybody who has experienced human grief, basically, there's comes with it. There's the actual loss. There's the stress of what you need to do in order to take care of the situation. There's the grief of, oh gosh, how do I go on with my life? How do I adjust? How do I go through making my life kind of whole again? So we've got all this human thing going on. But I really want to emphasize the idea of karmic grief. Now, what is karmic grief? So, to me, if we think about energy, our energetic essence of who we are, our soul is intertwined with the energetic essence of every other soul in our life. So, if you think about it like a karmic matrix, every one of us has a soul matrix. So, I'm going to do this a little visually for you to help you understand this. But if you were to kind of look at your own soul's matrix, as this idea of, this configures all of your strands, all of the lessons, all of the life purposes, all of the things that are wadded up into who you are. You have to kind of think of it like a ball of yarn. And so here's your karmic matrix. Here's another person's karmic matrix. And then you have to think about how those energetic matrices intertwine and kind of intersect to create your connections with those people. And so, if you think about these, I mean, I call them karmic strands. If you think about these karmic strands that are paired between a particular soul and yourself, or multiple souls and yourself, there's a tying together. There's this bond, there's this energetic bond. But you have to remember from a karmic perspective, oftentimes those bonds are laced with lots and lots of lessons. And that's where I talk about sticky family karmic shit. I had a video I put out a couple of years ago on that. I talk about the stickiness of those kinds of relationships. Now, not every relationship that we grieve is sticky, and not every relationship we grieve from a karmic level is sticky, but I'm really trying to help people understand that there is so much stuff interwoven into our relationships with other people that a lot of times we experience what I call this karmic grief. So, to me, what happens when someone has passed away and there's still a lot of karmic energy, meaning the lessons aren't fully learned, you haven't really maybe even reflected on what you're supposed to learn. But it's like there's still sticky stuff. There's things that are there that still need to be worked through. Now, I'll also make a point that this could, in fact, be part of the fact that maybe the person hasn't passed away, but you've separated as far as a relationship or you're estranged from someone, whatever it might mean. Those sticky strands can still remain. And what happens through the process of learning and growing, and this is why I do soul healing work, because the human work does not get there. It does not get to the point of removing and releasing those karmic strands. But what needs to happen with karmic grief is a lot of times you need to work through whatever the lessons are. You need to work through what was unsaid that I really wish I would have said, what was unexperienced that I wish I would have experienced. If there was a lot of anger involved, if there was abuse or manipulation or whatever it might have been, that stuff sticks around. Just because they have passed away or you have no contact with that person that does not mean that that karmic stuff doesn't stick around. And so it's not just a matter of going through cognitive behavioral therapy or grief counseling, because a lot of times that's just to kind of numb out the emotions. But you have to get down to that soul level in order to completely release it and clean it and scrub it, scrub it from your system. Now, I'm going to give you a couple examples of this for you to understand. I had a client years ago who she was in a marriage, and every time she came in, she was just so frustrated and upset about, something going on in the marriage, that he was emotionally distant or that he wasn't doing something around the house or whatever it might be. And, she was in a situation where she was pretty dependent on him financially. So she didn't feel like she could leave. But, she just came in over and over and over again, just complaining. And then finally, they got to the point where they decided, okay, we got to separate. This isn't working. So they moved into separate households, and he actually helped her get set up, helped her kind of get situated. And about 3 months later, after they separated, she came in for a session. She plopped on my couch and she said, I can't believe how bad I feel given that this is what I wanted all along. And she said, this hurts so much. And I had to help her understand that that whole situation, what she was experiencing, was the karmic part of that. The chapter of her life from a soul perspective was complete, but that didn't mean that those karmic strands had pulled out yet. And so if you think about how energetically you have to remove something from your system, and I use the word of a tapestry because you have to think metaphorically to go, okay, so how does this work? If you are pulling energetic karmic strands out of a tapestry that has been there for 30 plus years or could even be 2 years, it can be excruciatingly painful. And so even though from a human perspective, it makes all the sense in the world that it's better to be away from someone or better to live in a different situation, it can still viscerally hurt. Now, what I did with this person was I helped her see that that chapter of her life had closed, but that she still had things to learn. She had to do some self-reflection to see what her part in the situation was, and maybe how she wasn't very forgiving, and how she had stuff to that she wished she would have said that she didn't say. And also, most importantly for her, things she wasn't honoring about herself. And so this is how the soul comes into every aspect of the human condition. But this is how it comes into grief, is that we have to own up to our own part in any kind of bonding that we have. We have to learn the lessons that we're supposed to learn. We have to see what was that dynamic. And it very well could be that you had past life experiences with a particular soul that you had to work out in this lifetime in order to graduate and move beyond it so you can actually remove those karmic bonds. And for a lot of people, this may sound like, okay, I have no idea what she's talking about. But for those of you who have experienced this kind of thing, you're going to be going, oh, that's what that was. And so I really want to help people understand that there is more to the therapy field. There's more to the psychology field. There's more to healing than just going through the mind and kind of the emotions. You have to get down to that soul level. Another experience that I want to share that kind of displays the idea of karmic grief is the idea of when maybe we're leaving a chapter of our life in terms of a career, and we really thought that we were supposed to be a certain thing or a certain professional. And for whatever reason, we have had to let that go. I had a friend years ago who really thought she was supposed to be in the Air Force, and she did everything she could do to get into the Air Force. And she got there and she was thriving and she was loving it. And then she had an injury that was irreparable and she was basically medically discharged. And it absolutely tore her apart. It threw her world because in her mind, that's where she was supposed to go. So there's this karmic energy that went along with, in retrospect, I wish I would have been able to tell her way back then. That was about 30 years ago, but it's this karmic energy she had to go through in order to reinvent her life. And it was excruciating because her whole identity changed, her whole mindset had to change. But she had to be willing to go along with that part of the evolution in order to get where she is. Now, she's been in a government job for probably 20 years now. and it's been great for her. But she had to go through a very tough part of her life in order to release that karmic grief and let go of what she thought she was supposed to be doing. All the while, she's probably a lot more secure in what she's doing currently. Um, there's another example. What about when we have a parent that is a very difficult parent for us, and we have all this sticky energy, and we don't understand the dynamics? And granted, that's what my job is. That's kind of why I do what I do, is to help people understand grief from a deeper level. And so what happens if you have a parent that you have a very sticky relationship with, and it's like, in order to fully release that grief, you have to understand, what is the karmic part of this? Is there past life part, aspects of this that are playing a part? What are the lessons I'm supposed to learn? How am I supposed to be true to myself? And it can be very, very, very hard in parental relationships because you don't feel like you can stand up for yourself. You feel like you're supposed to honor your parents, or you feel like they're not going to hear it anyway. So there's this deeper kind of level of energetic imprinting that happens if we aren't able to heal what we're supposed to heal in human life. But that's where the karmic grief comes in, is that if practitioners understood that we aren't just healing human grief, we're healing that karmic grief, we could clear the slate. We could get past all of this far before, we were in the trenches with all of the emotion for ourselves. So anytime there is something sticky and icky and just layered, and it just kind of stays with you, that kind of grief is always an indication that there is karmic grief involved. And that's why to me, it is so important to go to someone who understands the soul, understands that there is something much deeper going on. Because again, the traditionally trained practitioners do not know how to get to that level, and they might even know that level is there. And so anything that feels like it is persisting, anything that is feeling like it is sticking around, and that basically it's that, again, sticky kind of stuff, that is probably because it is karmic grief, that there's more that needs to be worked through. Now, I have to admit, my relationship with my father was difficult because he was very self-centered from the time that he had his accident when I was 9. That's what happens a lot of times, is when people are injured or sick, they become very self-absorbed. And so it was very difficult at times. And after he passed, I had to go through, again, understanding this whole karmic kind of energy and how to really heal it from the deepest levels, and what I wish I would have said, and how I wish things would have been. But I also had a sticky relationship with my mother, and I understood that because I did some past life work, and I understood where that came from. And as soon as I had that aha moment, I was thinking, well, of course, this is why we have this dynamic going on between us. And then I had to, again, do a whole lot of work to unweave that. Every once in a while, it still kind of pops up, and I have to work through some of it. And so we aren't done grieving until that stickiness goes away. And a lot of people want to just shove it to the side because they don't really want to experience that kind of thing. But that's where, if we really want to clean our slate, if we really want to experience what I call soul health and radiance, we have to do the work to get through that karmic piece of this. And yet, if the people that you're working with, the practitioners you're working with, don't have the language, they don't have the understanding, it can be very difficult. But that's exactly why I'm doing this video. And this is exactly why I'm also eventually going to write this book as my Soul of Psychology series, another one of the books in that series, because people need to know that there are deeper levels of things that are going on. And this is also why I'm teaching this in my certification courses that I run. So the whole idea, and I'm going to go back and say this again, the whole idea of removing that karmic grief is knowing how to understand what those karmic ties are, what the roles you've played in their previous lifetimes, what the role was that you played in this lifetime, what it is that is sticky. You have to get to the bottom of what it is that's sticky between you and that soul in order to completely release it and find peace. Now, I say this over and over and over again, that the soul's most natural state is joy and contentment. But if we don't have peace because of a relationship that we've had with someone, again, whether they've passed away or we just are estranged from them or whatever, if we're not at peace with that, there's still some karmic energy that needs to be released. And that can be extraordinarily difficult if you don't know how to do it. So again, this is where I kind of try to at least help you understand why this residual kind of energy might be laying around, and why it may be popping up at times. Because again, it's our experiences are there to really season us and teach us. And yet, if there's a sticky element to it still, if there's something we're not at peace with, that means there's a karmic grief that's still there. So, for more information, you're going to be, again, if you're part of my YouTube channel, if you're part of my newsletter, you're going to get more information for when the Grief book of the Soul of Psychology series comes out. That's probably not going to be till 2026 at this point, but I just wanted to kind of give you a little bit of a taste of what's happening. Now, before I go, I do want to say that another part of karmic grief has to do with if you're feeling grief about the world at large right now, if you're feeling like there is something going on with your own energy, with what is happening around you, and there's a lot happening in the world right now, it's probably because there's some karmic energy around that. Now, when this US election happened in November of 2024, a lot of people immediately felt traumatized. A lot of people just immediately felt, oh my gosh, what is this? And I had to help many of them understand that some of it was being triggered because of, our new election results, and how it was that we're supposed to examine what was getting triggered so that we could heal even more in one or more ways. Now, there is a global sense of grief going on right now. There's many, many countries that are up in arms right now. And so some of us are feeling that karmic grief constantly because of what's going on in the world. We're grieving our easier life or more peaceful life. We're also grieving kind of the sense that we're going to have safety and all of those kinds of things that, we no longer feel. But it's that whole idea of there's an element or could be an element of karmic grief happening with that as well. So that's the stickiness when it's constantly, oh my gosh, what am I going to be doing here? How's life going to be? There's an element of karmic grief that's going on, even on this more subtle level. And even if you haven't lost someone particularly in the near past. So lots of different aspects about this karmic grief that I just wanted to share. And I just want to get you thinking about your own life and maybe if there's some soul healing that needs to take place for you. So for more information, feel free to go to my website, www.drkatherine.T.Kelly.com. You can stick with this YouTube channel. There's going to be more of the Soul of Psychology series videos coming. But again, I just want to occasionally put information out there to help you understand the soul side of this human condition that we experience, which is exactly why I talk about bringing ancient wisdom to the modern soul. Because in modern life, we don't always know what we're experiencing and why we're experiencing it. But if we can reintroduce the understanding of the soul, bring that back to life, we're going to get much further in knowing how to handle this human condition. Have a wonderful day. Thanks for listening.